Every time I do a LinkedIn audio event, I feel like I'm like a radio host. I'm like, welcome to the afternoon show. So last week we came together to talk about part 1, which is where we explained what lived experience intelligence is. And we also talked about what lived experience quotient is. So lived experience intelligence is the intelligence that you have because of your own lived experience. Lived experience quotient is what you use, right? LEI is what you have, LEQ is what you use. If you do not have this report yet, be sure to go, it's simple to get it. Go to livedexperienceintelligence.com. This week, we're talking all about the spectrum of lived experiences. And so we posted an article, a newsletter earlier today that was talking about how there are 4 different things that I want you to think about as we're talking about lived experiences and as we're talking about the spectrum of perspective. One is whether you have relevant LEQ. So everybody has lived experiences, right? But some of our lived experiences are more relevant to organizations. So that's one type. And then you go into a separate category with 3 different perspectives. You have primary LEQ, secondary LEQ, and tertiary LEQ. When it comes to this idea of primary LEQ, it means it is my lived experience. I lived it myself. And then when it comes to secondary LEQ, we're talking about the fact that I am connected to someone who's had that lived experience. And then when we talk about tertiary LEQ, it means that maybe I've learned it somehow, or I've read it, or I went to school and I learned about it. So a great example that we actually give in the report to describe the difference between primary, secondary, and tertiary LEQ is this. Primary LEQ, it could be an individual who was in the military or is a veteran. Secondary LEQ means that an individual whose sibling or maybe even their spouse is in the military or is a veteran. And then tertiary LEQ means that there's an individual who is familiar with military service or veteran affairs because they subscribe to, let's say, a military newsletter. Are you seeing the difference now? So it's this idea that everybody has lived experiences. And the lived experiences that we have, there is an intelligence with that. And if we start leaning in with our own lived experience intelligence, and if employers start tapping in to lived experience intelligence, then that becomes the it factor as to why increasing diversity is so beneficial, that it's so competitive to organizations overall. Because it's been a part of your lived experience, it shapes the lens through which you're looking at the world. What I would love to get more employers to understand is that that is the epitome of the it factor to why increasing diversity makes organizations more competitive. And if I could also help individuals who, whether they're on their job search today or they're thinking about being on their job search, it would be so awesome to be able to share with them that you have value. I mean, yes, you see things like degrees and, a certain level of work experience and certifications and things like that, but standing right shoulder to shoulder with all of that is your intelligence, your lived experience intelligence. I look forward to the day that we're able to say proactively how our lived experience intelligence informs our work versus it being some secondary, it just happened to come up in conversation. As we begin unpacking this idea of lived experience intelligence, it is really important for us to understand whether it's our secondary LEQ or our primary LEQ, and when do we need to scoot out of the way? If it's our secondary, when do we need to scoot out of the way to allow people who have the primary LEQ to lean in? Have you ever been in your workplace and you heard that something was about to happen. Maybe it was a new initiative or a new communication was about to come out, and you were privy to it. And your first thought, because of your primary LEQ, your first thought was, I don't think that's gonna work, right? You're like, that's not gonna go over the way that you thought it was gonna go over, right? But that is LEQ. Like, that is that moment, and sometimes we don't even recognize it in ourselves, and we may not even have the words in that moment to articulate what is going to go wrong. I remember being with an organization before that, and I don't remember all the details around it, but they were rolling out a mentoring program, and it was somehow the goal was to connect Black employees to executives. And when they were rolling it out, I was like, I don't think that's gonna work. I don't even know if I have the words to describe why I was having that reaction, but that's how powerful primary LEQ can actually be, that you have a reaction to something first, that you're triggered first because of your lived experiences. And then if we begin to unpack it, then the words and the insight and the intelligence follows. It's being able to say and just know for yourself that I am the expert in my own lived experience. Right? I am the expert in my own lived experience, and believe me the first time. Right? And so you hear a lot of people talk about this idea of believe me the first time. Like, do not gaslight me. Do not try to tell me that what I'm seeing or experiencing is right or wrong or left or right. Like, the insight that I have today, like, nobody can be more of an expert at my lived experience than me. And lived experiences are so nuanced. They can get so granular. But if we can begin using that to inform the work that we do, it is going to be amazing. So this idea of lived experience intelligence. So through the report, one of the conversations that we're talking about in the report is, how do we value it? And not just valuing it by saying, oh, this is awesome and thank you for sharing, but how do we value it in a way that people can be compensated by way of open job opportunities? But let's even be a little more higher level than compensation. How do we incentivize? So even as we're thinking about the LEQ advisory board, one of the things that I wanted to be sure of is that I'm not just saying, hey, can I pick your brain, right? I wanted to make sure that anybody coming into the LEQ advisory board knew what they were going to get, what the incentives were going to be. And a part of it is the networking. A part of it is the great conversations. A part of it will be the businesses that will be built, or the business generation that will come out of it. And another part of it is the gift that they got at the very end too. But I think that anytime we're talking about leveraging someone's lived experience intelligence, there should be a level of incentive behind it. It shouldn't just be a voluntary thing. And I think that that's the challenge of what's happening today, is that as organizations are working to increase diversity and they're seeing the benefits to their bottom line, and they're seeing that they're a more competitive organization, they're making more revenue, they're creating products and services that more people want, until we begin to name the it factor, which is the lived experience intelligence, until we name it, it's not until that time that we can say, now compensate us for it, now incentivize us for it, in all of the ways that relevant LEQ have added to your organization's bottom line. Each week, we're unpacking a different part of the report. And if you came on the conversation later, you can find your copy of the report by going to livedexperienceintelligence.com and download the report.